Hi, good morning. My name is Melanie Bechtel, and I'm a Senior Project Officer at Legal Aid. I want to welcome you to this one-hour webinar that we are going to be presenting with the new Disaster Response Legal Service. So welcome. So 2020 has been a pretty rough year. We've had fire, smoke, hail, floods, and landslides about starting around this time last year, and now we're in the middle of the pandemic. So this is a very topical issue, and it's great we have this new legal service who will be going through with you, including a mini masterclass on insurance law. So I'd like to acknowledge that I am broadcasting to you today from Aboriginal land, Gadigal land, and I would like to pay my respects to the Aboriginal ancestors who managed this land ecologically for many years before settlement. And I would like to say a warm welcome to all my Aboriginal colleagues and friends who are tuning in today. I would also like to welcome you if you're from a community legal center, if you're a private practitioner, or you're from Law Access, or if you're from another organization and you found us through the Legal Aid News. So we have a few pretty exciting brush-ups series coming up in the next 2 months. So we've got this one today. We have Law Prompt coming up next week. Evaluation and monitoring the week after, and then in November we have webinars on bike helmet laws, wills and estates, and the school exclusion matters. So that's my little plug for the brush ups, and I'll hand over to Jess now, who will get started with this webinar. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks Mel. So I was just going to really quickly, just for anyone who hasn't done one of these webinars, let you know how to ask questions. So we want it to be as kind of interactive as possible, I guess. So we've got quite a bit to get through, but just in case, so I'll let you know how to type questions. So you can type them in at any time. If we don't answer them during the webinar, we will try and look at them at the end. And you don't have to be shy about asking questions because they only really come through to me, and I'll just ask them as they are relevant, I guess. So to ask the questions, you can see the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, like in the picture on the slide now. If the control panel box, you can just type your questions in there and they'll pop up to me. Sometimes the control panel might shrink though, and there's just a little orange or red button that you can press to expand that box again. So we'll just do a quick check to see if everybody can hear me and everyone knows how to use questions. If you could just type into the box now where you're listening from to let us know. And I'll just give you a few moments to do that. Great, we've got Wiradjuri land, Newcastle, Orange, Port Macquarie, Lismore, Coffs Harbour, Kangaroo Valley. Great, lots of people, which is really good to see, and lots of people can hear me, which is all great. Okay, great. So today, obviously, we are doing the Disaster Response Legal Service and just getting everybody to meet the team. But firstly, I'll just let you know what topics we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to pass over to Sally in a moment to introduce you to the team and the service. We're going to talk a little bit about the new bushfire legal aid grant scheme. Then we'll get a quick financial counsellor's perspective, and then essentially we hand over to Marta Solofoni, who many of you will know, to do an insurance mini masterclass for us. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But Sally, if you're there now, I might pass over to you to just talk us through the team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jess. I'm having technical difficulties this morning, so you can't see me, which is probably not a bad thing. Thank you for your interest in disaster work, and thanks for coming to this webinar. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I'm meeting on today, which for today is the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. Normally I'm on Gumbaynggirr land. I'd like to acknowledge, recognise and appreciate all Aboriginal people for their deep connection and understanding and care for the land, which I think after the summer we've just had makes it feel all the more relevant. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, my Aboriginal colleagues today, and acknowledge that this is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. As Mel said, it's been quite a summer, and I'm sure many people tuning in today were affected in one way or another, whether you were personally affected or whether you assisted in the recovery efforts. And I really want to begin by acknowledging all of you out there that were part of the effort, not only the people who answered the phones and manned the advice line and all our law access staff and all the solicitors who attended recovery centres and community meetings, but also the people who stayed back and kept the home fires burning, allowing people to go off and do that work. It was really an amazing team effort. So I just really want to acknowledge everybody in that. The disaster recovery service it's interesting because we have Marta Solifoni, and I want to begin by really acknowledging Marta. She started with us in December. The fires had been burning for almost 8 weeks by then, and she truly had a baptism of fire, but she hit the ground running. Within days, she was being interviewed by Damien Carrick on the Law Report. A day later, she was jumping on planes coming up to the North Coast to attend community meetings. Her summer was cut short to jump on a plane and head down to Bega, only the plane couldn't land because of smoke. So she truly did have a baptism of fire. So I really want to acknowledge Marta, and you're going to hear about her great expertise. You'll hear her in action at the other end of this this webinar. I also really want to acknowledge Jo Evans, who is the lead of the consumer team, and Jo leads that team that have been just amazing in staffing the telephone advice line. That is, in the first instance, the 1800 number is staffed by Law Access, and again, a magnificent team there. But Jo really leads our systemic work and our law reform work, and you may have seen her. She actually gave evidence at the Royal Commission. So on top of our ongoing staff that are in the disaster response legal service, we excitingly have just got a whole lot of new funding, and with that funding we have been able to employ quite a few new people. So I'll begin by talking about the coordination team of the funding, and I'll start with you, Jess. Jess is our CLE officer, and she's also involved in COVID, but Jess will be assisting anyone out there who wants to do some CLE or presentations around bushfire work. We have Lara Stapleton, who is our marvellous data analyst, and we have Tom McKeith, and you'll be hearing from Tom in a little while because Tom will be talking to you about a new and exciting grants program for farmers and small business. On top of that, we have a senior solicitor in outreach, Charlene Naismith, and working with her will be Kim Busuttil. And their role really is to get out into the regions and really restart the work that was cut so short because of COVID, and get back out and reach communities. We're really trying to reach Aboriginal communities, vulnerable communities, and people that might have missed out first time round. We also have Finn Hipkin, who has been working in disasters pretty much since January, and Finn is a bushfire consumer lawyer working in head office, and he's doing some marvellous work around training, so keep your eyes out for that. We're really excited to have a financial counsellor, and you'll be hearing from Sharon Weston in a minute, and it's really exciting for our team. And we have the wonderful Farhana Karim, who's a paralegal. So that's our new team. We had a planning day yesterday. We met in person. We were all quite excited to be getting back to normal and talking and planning the work coming ahead. So I think the next slide, Jess, is just our little brag slide. Is it our infographic?
The next slide we've got is our working with our partners. So did you want to?
Oh, yes. And that's, yes, thank you. I'm just having, Sorry, Jess, I'm getting there.
That's okay.
Okay, yes, sorry. Now, during the summer, well, right at the very beginning of the summer, Meredith Osborne worked really hard to bring together the senior people in the legal service, the legal assistance sector. So Justice Connect, the community legal centres, the Insurance Council, Pro Bono, Law Society, Justice Connect, I think I've already mentioned, and brought all the partners together to have a collaborative and coordinated response to what was such a widespread disaster, both in scale and size and the impact on people. So we worked really closely together, and we had some really wonderful collaborations, particularly with the Shoal Coast CLC down on the south coast, and the mid-north coast up on the up in Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour. And so it was really exciting to be working so well together and sharing scarce resources to try to just get the spread out to the community as much as we could. And we also worked and continued to work closely with regulators, industry and stakeholders. And so now it's time for the bragging. Look, I'm not going to talk for too long because there's so many more people about to talk, but I just wanted to show you this is a snapshot of what we were able to achieve, or you were all able to achieve over the summer and last year. Over 1,000 legal services is just extraordinary. We attended more than 68 community meetings across the whole state. 468 calls were answered by Law Access. You can see the stats there. It's just amazing. And again, big shout out to all of you out there who were part of this, and I really thank you. And just for those who know me, I'm a data nerd. And so just one last thing is to say we were only able to produce this infographic because we have wonderful data, which is terribly important. And now we can remind you of the importance of how to collect data. Thanks, Jess.
We can. I'm just gonna introduce Tom McKeith at this stage. Tom, if you can maybe show your webcam. We're going to play a short video that Tom has created about the importance of collecting data, essentially. But Tom, I might let you just introduce it first. I think you need to unmute yourself. Sorry, Tom.
Is that better? I just got fantastic. Go to webinar just told me I was unmuted. So thanks everybody for joining us today. It's just a really quick little video that we've created to help remind people about our data recording requirements. In particular, I think it's going to be relevant for legal aid staff who are on the line, because it's about how we're recording the data internally. So if you're not working internally at Legal Aid, just hold on. The video is only short. I hope you enjoy it anyway, and we'll chat more on the other side.
Yep, great. And just a quick word that you have to turn on the volume. So once I put the video on, everyone who's attending the webinar, you have to click your own volume on for the button for this video. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear the fabulous audio that Tom's done. So just look out for that volume button. So I'll just switch over now.
It can be hard to know when to use the Disaster Response Legal Service flag and the COVID-19 flag in CCMS. To help you out, we're going to run you through when to use the flag and when not to. Service flags can be found by clicking on the Actions button in an open service. From there, select Project Flags and the specific flag you need. Remember, each new service you add to a matter requires a flag. So, you've got a matter related to the bushfires, flag it. Maybe advice for someone impacted by a flood, flag it. Anything connected to the COVID pandemic, you should flag it. Even if the legal issue is an insurance, fine, employment, or tenancy one, yep, flag it. Not sure if you've got time? Flag it anyway. Sick of all the flags in CCMS? Still flag it. Get told your dance moves are a disaster? Maybe don't flag that one. To summarise, anytime you have a service, that's disaster or COVID related, remember to flag it. Recording how many disaster and COVID affected clients we assist is essential for us to continue the great work we're doing. Did you know? CCMS also has a case study flag. You should use this flag when a client's circumstances, the work you did, or the outcome you achieved will be useful to illustrate a systemic issue. That's it. Thanks for watching and for helping us with our data recording requirements.
Okay, great. I hope people were able to see that. If there was any, Sally, I'll unmute you as well now. I hope people were able to see that.
I was.
I've heard nothing in the questions, so that's good. I'm going to go with yes. Tom, did you want to speak to the video at all, or should we move to your grant scheme next?
Let's move on to the grant scheme and we can chat a little bit about that.
Sure.
Okay, well, as has been mentioned, I'm the communications project officer working on this bushfire legal aid grant scheme, which is a new scheme for legal aid. And you'll be able to see some of the important facts about the scheme there on the slide. And my role is really to inform private practitioners, small businesses, and primary producers about the scheme. And I should also note at this point that the final details of the scheme haven't been fully approved as yet. So we haven't actually launched this scheme. So we're hoping it will be really soon. But everyone on the webinar today is really kind of getting the first taster of what the scheme will be about. So watch this space and we should be able to launch the scheme soon. And I also wanted to note that, as you may have already noticed, this scheme is dealing with the kind of unusual client group for legal aid, insofar as it's for small businesses and primary producers. So legal aid is just administering the scheme, and we're allocating funds to private practitioners who will be then providing the legal services to the small businesses and primary producers. And private practitioners can apply for that funding through grants online. So certainly for those private practitioners who are on the webinar today, it's something that might be of interest to you, and we're hoping to get the message out to as many private practitioners as possible about the scheme soon. And obviously more information will be coming when the actual scheme launches. So private practitioners can apply for up to $2,000 for an initial ERA grant and $5,000 of disbursements, and then extensions can be made in reasonable circumstances. And basically this grant money is available for any legal issue arising from the 2019-2020 bushfires in one of the affected local government areas. So I'll note that it's only for those fires. It's not for any new fires that might be coming up at this stage. So, we're anticipating that the money might be used for things like insurance disputes, commercial tenancy matters, or contract disputes that have arisen out of those 2019-2020 fires. But it really is available for any legal issues that have arisen out of those fires. It's quite broad in that regard. So I think the most important thing I'd like to inform the flag, let's say, to inform the legal aid lawyers who are on the webinar today, is that this grant is available. And I know everyone's default when they hear about business legal issues relating to businesses or primary producers is to say, to do a referral, because that's not the usual thing that we assist with. But I just want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that through this scheme, we are assisting to provide some funding for those legal issues. So it's a really important thing for everyone to be aware of. And if you do have a small business or a primary producer who comes to you with a legal issue, you can inform them about the scheme, encourage them to speak to their private lawyer about it if they have a private lawyer, or refer them to head office and to, we think, either the DRLS or grants to do a referral to a private lawyer. And there will again be more information about the process there once the scheme launches and we add a page to our DRLS website. So just want to kind of raise it here on the webinar, make everyone aware of it, and let everyone know that more information will be coming soon about the scheme.
Yeah, so watch this space essentially and spread the word. But yeah, more info will be coming soon. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm now going to just move to Sharon. I'll invite you to, if you've got your webcam up, that'd be great. And we're just going to talk quickly about financial counsellors and the work that they do and how they can help in this space as well. And we have Sharon Weston, our financial counsellor in the team here with us today to just talk us through this essentially.
Okay, so a financial counsellor will see a variety of financial issues, and our role is to spend time with people to help them understand their personal finances, to assess their overall financial situation and discuss their options with them, to ensure that individuals are aware of their financial rights and their obligations. We often act for clients to seek assistance from creditors, coach clients towards self-confidence in financial matters, and assist clients to gain access to goods and services that may benefit them financially. For example, a lot of clients don't know about food banks and energy vouchers or work development orders. So a big part of our role is education, because a lot of people don't really understand finances, and it's something we're encouraged not to talk about as well.
Yeah. And how has it been different in the disaster space, I think, Sharon?
Oh, well, people have lost documents. They've lost access to things that are important to them. They often don't know or are disoriented about the normal places they would go to for assistance. So I haven't worked in this disaster field a long time myself, but the few times that I have had clients who've been in that situation of having just come through a disaster, that's the sort of thing that you do see.
Yeah. Okay, great. And yeah, Sharon's in the team, and so she's available if people have referrals or they want some financial counsellor advice or what they would recommend or how to get in touch with other financial counsellors or Sharon, just contact the team or contact Sharon directly, I guess.
Of course.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so moving swiftly along further in this webinar, I'm now going to bring Marta Salafoni on. Here we go. And I'm going to pass over to her, who's going to run a bit of an insurance masterclass for us. And there's also a handout that goes with this part of the presentation, which you can find in the handout section of your GoToWebinar little bar there. And it'll be emailed around after the webinar. And also I've had a few requests for the slides of this presentation. So I'll also email around a PDF of the slides as well as this handout. But Marta, I'll hand over to you. We'll start with essentially insurance in the disaster space. Cool.
Now I think I've unmuted myself. Yes.
Perfect. Yep, can hear
Great.
you.
Thanks. Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm broadcasting from, which is the land of the Cabral people of the Darug Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, as well as my Aboriginal colleagues and friends who are attending today's session. And I just also want to acknowledge that this is, and always will be Aboriginal land. So this is the insurance mini masterclass portion of our brush up today. Thanks, Sally, for the shout out earlier. It's been a very interesting and busy time at Legal Aid, but it's been a fantastic experience for me. There's such passionate people here at Legal Aid, so it's made working here very enjoyable. So I'm going to quickly try to go through as much about insurance, but particularly how it relates to disasters. I'll try to get through that quite quickly, so we might have some time at the end to go through some questions. So please send through your questions as we go along. I've been practicing in insurance law for the last about 7 years. I enjoy practicing in this area. It you see a vast range of issues, and it's an area of consumer law that affects or has an impact on a huge number of people. I'm always keen to hear about a complicated insurance matter and tricky questions, and I just like taking on big insurance companies. So I hope we can sort of go through this session, and that might become more obvious to you all. Today's not about mastering insurance, and if you're thinking about helping out during a disaster, you definitely don't need to be a master of insurance, but hopefully this training will help you to spot the issues or get an idea of what to look for. So I'll quickly go through some of the basics of insurance law. And
in preparing this as well, I mean, Marta is so passionate about insurance, and we decided that probably moving forward, we'll do a much more in-depth insurance masterclass to get her to impart a lot more of her knowledge onto you. So if you're interested in that, I guess just watch the regular space that you found this one from, and that'll be coming up soon.
Absolutely. I joke around that I can talk about insurance all day long, but I really can. So that more detailed training hopefully will be out soon between now and the end of the year. It's only a couple of weeks. 72 days until Christmas. You're welcome.
Oh, gosh.
There you go. So we'll just start off with that first slide. As some of you will know, it's not always obvious to clients that they may have an insurance problem or that it is a legal issue. This is especially so during disasters. Lots of people will be concerned about their immediate financial situation. Some of them will have been evacuated and may not be able to get back to their property for some time. So lodging a claim, it can be daunting and overwhelming. So, often people don't come to you for insurance as their first sort of issue that they're wanting to deal with. But the other thing is that there's that very Aussie attitude that, someone else is worse off, and people don't quite realise or recognise their own legal issues because they're focused on helping someone else or letting someone else get the help that's available. So insurance can often be a topic that only becomes apparent as you talk with a client and talk through their various issues with them. Another reason why clients may not consider insurance to be a legal issue is that they may think that they can't change the outcome. So they'll think that once a decision is made by their insurer, that there's nothing they can do. There's nothing that can be done about that. And I think it's important that as lawyers, as community workers or consumer advocates, it's important that we know that that's not the case. And to a certain extent, it's about the vibe. If you feel that there is something not quite right about the insurance matter, then start asking questions and consider the dispute mechanisms. You don't have to take the first decision from an insurer. And in fact, clients often have nothing to lose by taking their matter further, other than time given to the dispute process. The dispute process, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's free of cost to clients. So it's often worth just raising it at least at an internal review stage with the insurer. I'll talk about that a little bit further a little later.
So shall we start with what is insurance?
Yes, definitely. All right, so what is insurance? Essentially, it's a contract where a consumer and an insurance company are the parties to that contract, and just a definition there, it's where the insurer and the insured, in receipt of premium, agrees to compensate the insured for certain defined potential losses that may occur during a specified period of coverage. I'll cover that a little bit later, and hopefully a little bit more detail. These are the most common types of policies in a disaster, and you probably will have all heard of at least some of these. The top 4 probably you would all have heard of them. In disasters, most people will, or some people will hold maybe a home building policy on its own. Some people might just hold a home contents insurance policy on its own, particularly if you are a tenant. You would often just have renters insurance or home contents insurance, and then there is the combination. So some people will hold both a home and contents insurance policy. Another common policy is motor vehicle policies, and particularly in the last disaster, because of the scale of it and the areas that the disaster hit, there are areas large blocks of land, may have several properties on there, so sometimes there is also landlord insurance involved. And also we saw a lot of business insurance type matters in the last bushfire season. Lots of those areas are, you know, mum and dad businesses, people just running their own businesses and they're making income off the land. So business insurance is also a common policy that people hold, and also sometimes income protection and salary continuance. Our focus is really going to be around the general insurance products, your home building, home contents, those sort of policies. Great, we'll go to the next slide.
Yep. So what is the law?
Okay. In insurance, I mean, there is a number of relevant legislation when it comes to insurance, but the most relevant for our purposes as consumer advocates is the Insurance Contracts Act, and also the Insurance Contracts Regulations. You'll see it's Commonwealth, so it's not a state law, it's Commonwealth and applies in all the states. So generally, you know, people across Australia will experience insurance problems, and this is a relevant law when we're advocating for them. And also very helpful is the General Insurance Code of Practice. That is the 2014 Code of Practice. This sets out sort of how insurers are to handle claims, the standards in which insurers interact with consumers or the insured. There is a new code that was launched earlier this year. It's the 2020 code, but that won't officially take effect until July next year. It was meant to be January next year, but that's been pushed back due to COVID-19. So that new code comes in July next year. Great.
Okay, so now I think we're talking about important insurance documents.
Yes. All right, important insurance documents. So your insurance contract or policy is made up of two documents essentially. You've got your certificate of insurance that confirms that you do hold insurance with that insurance company, and it will generally contain the type of cover that you've got, with what type of insurance it is, the value of your policy, and if there's any particular exclusions that apply in under your contract, and it'll also have details of your excess that's payable and your premium and the time that you're covered for, so the period of cover. There's also the fund document, the product disclosure statement. You'll know this document is often a booklet, and this sets out the terms and conditions of your cover. So these documents together they make up your contractual, your insurance contract, and it will set out your contractual rights and obligations for both parties. Now they differ from insurer to insurer, particularly terms in the product disclosure statement, and even just the look of the certificate of insurance, they also differ as well. So these are important documents. In disasters, people may have lost these documents, and that's not an issue. If that's the case, we can always get in contact with the Insurance Council of Australia, and they can track down who the insurer is for that client if they do hold an insurance policy.
Great. So we'll move now to the common insurance terms, and this is where the handout that I mentioned before will come into use for everyone watching, because Marta goes into a lot of detail about each of these terms, so you can have a look at those later, but for now.
Yes, so what's included in a policy, it can vary, but there are some common terms that would be useful for you to know. There's a long list of common terms, but these are the ones that I think are most relevant particularly in disasters. And if you don't remember exactly what they all mean, at least being aware that these are terms to look for is quite important. So there's your list there. So insured events, I'll quickly go through them. Your insured events is essentially the list of events that you are insured for, and for example, so they are the defined events. For example, fire, storm, theft, accidental damage, that sort of thing. So that will be set out in the policy document. Your sum insured, that refers to the value of your policy or the maximum amount that your insurer will pay for a claim. And it's important to note that you know, the biggest issues in disasters is the asset that's most relevant in disasters is the home. And what's important to note there is that the property value is not the same as the rebuild value. So when you're looking at sum insured, one of the biggest issues around this in disasters is that people often find out they're underinsured because the cost to rebuild their property actually costs a lot more than what the value of the property was at the time they took out an insurance policy. So the sum insured is quite important. The benefit, that just refers to what you will receive from your insurer if your claim is accepted. That can be the standard benefit, so usually where they repair, replace, or cash settle a claim, but it can also refer to additional benefits as well. The coverage, this is what's included in your actual policy. So let's say in home building insurance, it can set out what buildings or what types of buildings are covered. So for example, garages, sheds, cabins, that sort of thing. It will set out the coverage, will also set out the locations of the property that is actually covered, who is covered in terms of people insured, and the limits of compensation under a policy. All right, the excess is what you'll probably hear a lot of. The excess is your contribution to the costs of your claim. The starting point is always going to be that anytime you make a claim, excess is payable, unless there are exceptions under your policy that sets out you don't have to pay the excess if you meet, A, B, C, whatever those conditions are. You can often negotiate a cheaper premium if you want to pay a higher excess if you do have to make a claim. If a client is unable to afford their excess, the insurer should still process a claim, but you would be looking at negotiating an instalment arrangement to pay off the excess, or it can be deducted from the final payout amount from the insurance. So there's always ways that you can negotiate with your insurer about the excess itself. Exclusions, I think that's self-explanatory, refers to the clauses. There's often a list of general exclusions in the policy, and then they will also go into specific exclusions under different headings in the policy as well. So these are the things that insurers can rely on to deny a claim or to limit their liability for a claim. And the other most common term that you'll often find in disasters or relevant disasters is total loss. There was a lot of total loss in the last bushfires, and total loss is defined in each. It can vary from policy to policy, and each policy will set out its definition of when the total loss is triggered. Generally, it refers to when an asset is so badly damaged that it be uneconomical to repair it, and in some cases it will result in the maximum sum insured being paid out as a settlement of the claim. So just quickly, those are the most common insurance terms I think is most relevant in disasters.
Yeah. We just had a question before,
Yes.
which I think related to the most important documents. Is there a tracking down? Is tracking down done at no cost?
Tracking down, yes, that's free of charge. When a disaster hits, the Insurance Council of Australia often set up a catastrophe hotline, and part of that is that they will help people because they acknowledge the issues that people experience in a disaster. They know people lose documents, and also people have experienced trauma, and they may just simply forget who they're insured with. So yes, that is free. There is no charge in that. Simply just call up their hotline. I think they just need the name and maybe date of birth, and they can track it down for you.
Great. Okay, so I think we'll move on now to the common exclusions, terms and conditions to be aware of in a disaster.
Yes. All right, you'll all know, I did allude to it earlier, but there are lots of exclusions in a policy. Insurers obviously will set out ways in which they can limit their liability to you, but these are the most I guess these are the two most sort of common exclusion that I think is important to be mindful of. The first one is about embargoes or no coverage periods. So usually there's a set time at the commencement of when you first take out a policy where you're not actually covered. So most commonly, if you're taking out a policy, usually the first 48 or 72 hours of you taking out the policy are not covered. There can be some exceptions to that, but there generally is an embargo period from when you first take out a policy. So I have heard this in previous disasters where clients are taking out policies as they see the fire coming down. So in that scenario, taking out a policy that soon or during that time could often mean that there is an embargo period and they wouldn't be covered for any claim made under that policy. So that's a very common feature in all policies, embargo or no coverage periods. And then I thought just an exclusion that is, oh, sorry, just maybe we'll go to the next slide. So there's the embargoes or no coverage, and then there's also the no flame damage, and I'll go through that.
Yeah, so there's an example there that you've got of the embargoes, ComInsure home insurance.
Yep. So most policies, most product disclosure statements for insurers are available online. So you just go online and Google a ComInsure home and contents product disclosure statement, which is what I did. And this is an example of how they word it in their policy. So as you can see, they say you're not covered for bushfire the first 48 hours of taking out a policy unless, and those are the exceptions I mentioned earlier. So there can be exceptions, but generally there is an embargo period.
Yeah.
All right, go to the next slide. The other one, and this didn't come up a lot in the last bushfire, at least as far as I know, but there are generally an exclusion if there are, some policies might have an exclusion, is what I meant to say, around the type of damage to the house or to the property. So in bushfires, usually what they're looking at is that the damage has to be caused by the flame itself, and that if there is damage caused by scorching, melting, smoke damage, those types of damage may not be covered in an insurance policy. So even though your client may be living in a bushfire affected area, if their property is not damaged by actual flame or the fire itself, it may be excluded. But again, as I said, we didn't see a whole lot of that in the last bushfire, but there's something to be mindful of and keep an eye out. And I've just got some examples there of.
Does that include embers as well, Marta?
Yes, it can. It can include embers. So if you've got embers floating in the air and then it causes, that happens a lot, is embers floating in the air and then it catches on fire. Some policies, I have seen a policy where it specifically excludes embers.
Oh,
these two don't. And I've got to admit, though, that policy I'm talking about, that was a few years ago that I saw that, so it may have been changed now. But this is the AMI policy and the UE policy, and you can see that kind of exclusion or the wording. That AMI one's particularly interesting, where it's talking about burning building within 10 metres of the insured address. So that's quite different. So each policy will have its own wording, so it's important to have a look at that. But again, as I said, in the last bushfires, we didn't see a whole lot of this type of exclusion being applied.
Yep.
There are a number of other exclusions, but just to get you sort of mindful, or have it in your mind that sometimes there are sort of exclusions and there are different wording that applies. So just things to look out for.
Yep. So we'll move now to the additional benefits under a policy.
Yep.
Great.
All right. So you should always check for any additional benefits and how they're worded in a policy. Some additional benefits, I mean, it's a bit tricky because that word additional benefits suggests that it's in addition to whatever other standard benefits that you have in your policy, but you will need to check whether that additional benefit is included in the sum insured or whether it's on top of the sum insured amount. So as I mentioned before, the sum insured is often the maximum amount that you're entitled to in a payout from a policy. But if the additional, depending on the wording of the policy, the additional benefit may be paid on top of that maximum amount, the sum insured. So it's important to have a look at that type of wording in a policy. These are the ones that most commonly come up in a disaster. The very first one, the emergency temporary accommodation, that is a very important benefit in a disaster where you may no longer be able to live in your house. Again, policies vary in what they offer. Some may have limitations on the amount, so the benefit amount itself in terms of dollars, and others may have a limitation on the length of time for temporary accommodation. So again, that just comes down to the wording of the policy. Another one that comes up in disasters is demolition and removal of debris. These costs can be significant, and they definitely were in the last bushfires. And you'll need to check the wording again, because it's a matter of, you know, what type of debris is actually covered. And I think we've got some samples, or maybe not. I think that might be in the handout. What's on the next
We've
slide?
got this one about the emergency
we've got that one.
accommodation.
Is there another part to that? There we go. Okay. So that's an example from the Budget Direct policy. So you can see there the most relevant part there. You know, it talks about that they'll pay 10% of your home or content sum insured for temporary accommodation, and then they'll pay the cost of that's in addition. This is in addition to your home or content sum insured. So those kind of wordings is what you're looking for in those types of additional benefit clauses. Yeah, each one's going to be a little bit different, but that's what you're looking for, is what is the limit of the actual additional benefit and whether or not it's included in the sum insured or on top of the sum insured.
And we had a question going back again, I think, to the embargoes and the flame damage examples, which was, are there any arguments against these exclusions that are worth running?
Oh, look, it really just depends on the circumstances. There is a matter that I'm aware of where a person had called up the insurance company to take out a policy. The fires was already on its way, and the insurance, the representative from the insurer asked them, look out the window, can you see fires? And the client had looked out one window, couldn't see the fires, but of course if he looked out the other window, would have seen fires. But based on the advice that was given to that client, the client was able to successfully dispute this in AFCA because the client had done what the representative had actually told them and looked out the window, and they looked out the window, couldn't see any fires because of course they were facing east or whatever, but the fire was coming from the other direction. And on the advice of that representative, they were able to raise a dispute, and that claim was paid out. That's not always going to be true in every circumstance. So it really comes down to what happened at the time they took out the policy, what they were advised by the insurance company representative, and then, you know, you'd really have to assess that situation on its own circumstances to really work out whether there's something to dispute. But again, as I was saying earlier, that the first decision from the insurer doesn't have to be the one that you accept. It's free to raise a dispute internally. It's free to raise a dispute through external dispute resolution. So it may be worth raising the dispute anyway. And sometimes insurers do make commercial decisions outside of the policy terms. So yeah, and it's just something to be mindful of, and where you can start asking questions and see if you can push back with the insurer.
No, and this leads us quite nicely onto how to dispute the insurer's decision.
Yes. All right. So The starting point, I just quickly put out there. So with a claim, the starting point is always that the insured or your client needs to establish on the balance of probabilities that they do have a valid claim, or essentially that they've suffered a loss caused by an event that the policy should respond to. Once they've done that, the onus then shifts to the insurer. If the insurer is then looking at whether they can decline a claim, they must prove or establish that there is an exclusion or a condition under the policy that they can rely on to deny that claim or to limit their liability for the loss. Now, with that, I always say to people, for the insurer to deny a claim, they've got to establish the just cause for it. Let them do that. I see a lot of people who say, "Oh, the policy says I'm probably not am not covered." All you need to do as an insured in putting in a claim is just show that the damage on the balance of probabilities would have been caused by an insured event. Let the insurer do their job in establishing whether or not there is a way for them to decline it, and then for them to provide the reasons for that. So the first decision by the insurer that would usually be made by a claims officer. It's a reviewable decision. If it's been denied, they should already provide you with the written reasons, but otherwise make sure you request for written reasons, and you can then escalate it to the insurer's internal dispute resolution. That's the internal review process. Now, the IDR decision, they can uphold the original decision or overturn the original decision, but they can also overturn the original decision and accept the claim, but they can also decline the claim for a different reason. So if it's not favourable, again, you want to make sure that you've got written reasons from them, setting out the basis of their decision. And that is the final stage from the insurer. That's the insurer's final decision. But it's also reviewable. You can escalate it then to external dispute resolution, EDR, and for insurance, this is the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, so AFCA. AFCA is free to our clients, or free for consumers. It's independent, and that determination, it's binding on an insurer if it's accepted by the insured.
Yeah. So
Okay,
yeah, so when to lodge that EDR?
Okay, when to lodge. All right, there's different stages. I mean, look, you can lodge at different stages in AFCA, but there are more effective ways of lodging, more effective times in lodging in AFCA. So in terms of, generally AFCA requires you to go through the IDR process of your insurer, but in disasters, AFCA has its own disaster response process, and they will often have a look at matters and work out whether it's urgent and whether they can bypass any of the usual requirements before you can lodge in AFCA. So you can lodge before the first decision or IDR decision is made, but generally only if there are exceptional circumstances. Everyone may think that their matter is urgent, but it's not necessarily the case. But if there are exceptional circumstances making the client's claim incredibly urgent, then you could lodge in AFCA before a first decision or IDR decision is made. Again, you can lodge in AFCA after lodging a dispute in IDR if the decision is unfavourable or there is no response from the insurer after 45 days of requesting an IDR review. You can go to AFCA then. And the AFCA time limit, just generally, you must lodge the complaint, must be lodged within 6 years from when you found out or should have known about the problem, or within 2 years from the final IDR response, whichever is earlier. That time frame it makes it a little bit more flexible time frame or time limit that AFCA goes by. Just looking at that definition, so there are time limits, but generally you can lodge if you've gone to IDR. If you're getting nothing within that 45 days, just lodge in the AFCA.
Yeah. Now we're going to move to your final slide, which is it worth disputing case studies, but also just letting everyone know that we've only got 5 minutes left. So if they do have questions, just to start writing those in for Marta. or anyone else that's presented today, and we can try and get through as many of those as possible.
Okay, this one's a very short answer is yes, generally. It's generally worth disputing. And like I said before, it's free. In most cases, I mean, even with tricky matters and you're not entirely sure, it's generally worth at least raising it internally for an internal review, and hopefully you get a sensible person who will review the original decision and then give some reasons about whether or not they're going to uphold that decision or overturn it and accept their claim. And obviously we always want them to overturn it and accept the claim. But I point this out whether it's worth it, because in our experience, especially in the last fires, that even where the policy you know, the insurer may very well have been able to decline the claim based on the wording of the policy. Because of the nature of disasters, when we've raised disputes with insurers, in some cases they may actually have a more flexible approach to what the policy covers. In other cases, they may just be willing to make a commercial decision to step outside of a policy and make a payment, you know, beyond what a client might be entitled to under a policy. But also, another important thing is that sometimes the insurers just get it wrong and they just interpret their own documents wrong. And unfortunately, it's one of those cases where it depends on who you get and how they've interpreted the situation, the claim itself, and what their the policy wording is. But we've had quite a lot of success in either increasing the original payout advice from the insurer. So we saw lots of clients where one client, you know, she was told that she was only entitled to a certain amount under her policy. We reviewed the policy and suggested that maybe she should be entitled to a little bit more based on our understanding of it. When we raised it with the insurer's internal dispute resolution, that resulted in a further additional payout from her insurer, and it was about $20,000. So it's, you know, there's significant amounts. The difference that you can make in your client's matter can be very significant. There's large amounts of money that can be sitting there waiting for them, but it's just a matter of raising it with the insurer to go through it again and get them to have another look at it, because sometimes they do just get it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just going to cut it short. I do have quite a few case studies, but I thought I'd just cut it short and see if there are any questions.
Sally also just wanted to wrap us up. So Sally, I'll just bring you back in. I know your camera's not working, but you should be unmuted.
Do you want to wrap up now, or do you want to deal with questions first?
Oh, we can't hear you very well.
Oh, can't you? Is
that
that's better?
Yep.
Oh, did you want to do questions first or wrap up?
Well, we haven't had any questions come through, so I assume Marta has been perfectly covered everything. No one has any questions. They understand insurance completely. So if people do have questions and they don't ask them now, I mean, you can email them through to the disaster email address. And as I said, I will email through all of the documents that we've talked about today. And so if you have questions, you can just email back to me and I can pass them on to Marta. And as I said, we will be running another more in-depth webinar about insurance at another point later on this year. So just stay tuned for that. So Sally, I think you're good to wrap up.
Okay, well, look, thank you so much, Marta. Every time you speak about insurance, I learn something new. I was down at one of the recovery centres at Bega, and I was with one of the solicitors from Shoal Coast Community Legal Centre, and we couldn't work something out, and we rang Marta and put her on loudspeaker, and we felt like she was the voice of reason, and just this calm voice coming through the phone, and just gave us the answer. And you're always so available, Marta, so thank you for your expertise and your generosity. I also wanted to mention that Marta worked with the Financial Rights Legal Service to do some training earlier in the year of the CLC, which then meant that they went and worked in the disaster space at the recovery centres. So we worked really closely with financial rights, and I omitted to say that earlier. So our partnerships are really important. Just one last thing for regional solicitors out there. I mentioned earlier that Charlene Naismith and Kim Busuttil are working in this space, getting back out into communities until 30 June next year. But keep an eye in your own communities, please, because there's a lot of work happening in bushfire land at the moment. Lots of organisations have got funding. There's lots of work being done. Please keep your eyes open, and if you've got any questions, or if you're thinking of doing any work, please coordinate and collaborate with Charlene and with Kim and with Jess, because we'll keep all of that together. But I just wanted to thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jess. That was really great. But that's me. Thanks, Jess.
And Mel, did you need to wrap anything up for people before they start dropping away?
No, that was all for me. I just wanted to plug that. Yeah, we've got quite a few webinars coming up. So thank you everyone for joining. I think we had over 60 people just then.
We did. I've got 63 as our total number.
Excellent.
So that was great.
So yeah, thanks everyone. And thank you so much, Mara and Tom and Sally and Sharon. That was excellent. And Jess, thank you so much. So
no
this was recorded and we'll pop it up on the intranet so that anyone who missed out can take a look.
Awesome. Okay, thank you everybody, and we'll see you all soon.